I've just finished watching the season finale of House of the Dragon, The Queen Who Ever Was, and I want to talk about this episode. Now, I'm a huge fan of it, and we need to start the show, but before we do, I have a second channel called BBG, I have a Patreon, and you can join this channel if you want early access and so on to content, and exclusive content that only a handful of people can see at the moment. So let's start the show. House of the Dragon has progressively become one of my favourite TV shows. I enjoy the casting, the acting. Matt Smith took a lot of time to grow on me. But I feel kind of 50-50 on the season finale, The Queen Who Ever Was. I don't know why it felt so disjointed, and then after watching it, I started taking it apart and letting my brain do what it does. So here we go. I feel like when I watched it, I wasn't watching a series finale, I was watching a mid-season finale. That's the thing where it hit. It was like, this is not the season ending, this is a mid-season thing. Remember when TV shows used to do a mid-season hiatus? That's what this felt more like. And it kind of just left me in that weird void of both, I love elements of it, I think it set up a hell of a lot, and it did tie up a few of the loose ends quite nicely, but there was definitely some issues that just glared out at me. One of them was the pacing. It did feel disjointed and rushed in places. It felt like they were trying so desperately to tie up the loose ends without giving them any of the attention they deserve. Important plot points were glossed over in favour of dramatic but somewhat hollow scenes. The result in the episode, for me, lacked depth, and it lacked the intrigue that the episodes previously had kind of built. And it drove me insane. It felt like this episode needed to be longer. It needed like another episode, a two-parter, or just a longer episode, something just to give a bit more oomph to it and tie up this kind of disjointed narrative that was in and out. Again, it wasn't necessarily bad, it just felt disjointed. And it also ignored a lot of character development and character arcs. Maybe they're leaving them for season 3. The character development throughout this series has been one of its strengths, but the final seemed to forget a lot of the progress that was made. One of the main characters who was built up to be complex and strong-willed was reduced to making erratic decisions, and she seemed out of character. Daemon, for example, his arc took an unexpected twist, and it felt kind of forced in places. There were character changes that felt kind of abrupt to me, and it did break my immersion a little bit of the show. It was like, what have we missed? I get why they were doing it, though. They're trying to lay that groundwork for the 3rd season, but there was a way of laying this groundwork that didn't make the characters feel kind of different in places. I also felt it was kind of predictable. I kind of saw the ending coming, and again, it wasn't necessarily a bad ending, but it wasn't a great ending. It was that weird middle ground. This episode leaned very heavily on rushing forward with lots of twists, and we kind of knew what was going to happen. The political intrigue felt missing in this one. That kept me on the edge of my seat, and it felt kind of lacking. Instead, we were treated to a series of predictable events that climacted in a somewhat anticlimactic showdown that left me kind of cold. Like, it needed something more. It needed more build. It needed more oomph. Now, I don't know. I'm going to talk about this because I don't know if this was the series issue, production issue, or a streaming issue. I was watching on Now TV, and I don't know what was going on with the colour palette. It kept changing, and I don't know if that was just streamed or an error in production. Usually a show has a colour palette, everything's timed to that colour palette, and it was changing. And I know that's a weird technical thing, but I don't know if that was just production or streaming. So I'm not going to go into that too much because it could just be an error, it could just be fixed, because that can be fixed. But some of the cinematography did feel a little bit flat. And that's something that kind of, there were a lot of stuff I felt like I'd seen this before. And the colour palette was weird. Like, it just drove me insane. It felt like the lighting and colour palette were drab. But then the next scene it would be bright, and they'd be in the same room having the same, continuing the conversation. I feel like this was just a missed opportunity. It should have been an epic climax. And instead it was, let's clean up all the loose ends, sow some seeds, and just rush towards the conclusion. And I really liked the concept, and I'm going to give credit to the actors. They did a really good job. But it felt, there were definitely some subplots that they didn't develop that felt like they ended abruptly as well. And I don't know how to explain that one. It felt like they were rushing to that end. And that's the only way I can describe it. I think it had potential. I think there were a lot of good ideas. I think the actors were really good, but the episode's poor pacing, ignoring the character arcs, and somewhat predictability left it feeling kind of underwhelming. It wasn't a great episode, it wasn't a bad episode, it was a mid-episode, and it should have maybe been longer and just had more oomph and more stature to it. That's how I felt coming out of it. And I'm hoping, even with the hiatus with season 3, and the hiatus does concern me because it'll either make it or break it, that it will tie up some more plot and hopefully not repeat this kind of fast pacing, disjointed storytelling that this episode did. I was actually kind of surprised because it felt very different to the previous episodes. So tell me what you think in the comments below, and I'll talk to you guys later.